Hello, welcome to another edition of Humble Theology. My name is John, and we are looking at the Westminster Confession of Faith. We are in chapter 6 now. It's titled Of the Fall of Man, of Sin, and the Punishment Thereof. And we're obviously starting in section 1. So let's read that, and then we'll kind of discuss it little bits in here. There's many commentary, many lessons on the confession. It's no means an exhaustive study, and people have done much more in-depth studies than I have. So I guess maybe you could just call this an introductory type of class or something. Anyway, so chapter 6, section 1 says, our first parents, being seduced by the subtlety and temptation of Satan, sinned in eating the forbidden fruit. This their sin God was pleased according to his wise and holy counsel to permit, having purposed to order it to his own glory. So this is taking a stance and a look at the fall from a very pointed angle. So the fall is contained within the providence and plan of God. It's nothing that happened, just, God wasn't expecting it. God had no idea this would happen. Surely God could have done something else to have prevented Adam from doing this thing. All these things we mull over in our heads. But if we think about the person and the character of God, then he's all-knowing. And he's all-powerful. So he knew any and all other types of ways that this could have unfolded. He foreknew what Adam's choices would be, that he was created righteous and yet still would choose this path for himself and his posterity. But also that in God's all-powerful, that man wasn't so created in such a way that he's able to thwart God and do all these weird things that some other denominations and people hold to. It's like, no, this all falls within the scope of God's providence. So in anything that happens in any part of any day, it's according to God's will, purpose, and plan. Now, it may not be according to his revealed will, what's right, what's wrong, his moral law, but if it happened for a reason. We all say that. So we have to apply that to everything. This is further discussed in chapter 5 of the Confession, which we've been looking at if you want to go back and look at those. So Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 5, on God's providence, section 4, says the almighty power, unsearchable wisdom, and infinite goodness of God so far manifests itself in his providence that it extends itself even to the first fall. So we discussed this a little bit more back then too. So you can't have random events that God didn't know about, didn't account for, didn't foreknow, didn't approve of, didn't have the power to do something about. And that within this section we read, it says their sin, Adam and Eve, it's their sin. And this basically takes us back to the Confession, chapter 5, section 2. We talked about second causes. The action belongs to man. Adam sinned, Eve sinned, and yet God can know and providentially have a wherewithal about allowing this. And the Confession said to permit, but it's a permission based on second causes. And again, you can go back and watch those videos too. Confession of Faith, chapter 5, section 2 discusses second causes. So it had to happen. It could not have happened any other way. We could beat ourselves up over and over and over again by saying, well, couldn't God have just, and fill in the blank with whatever. And sure, there's thousands of things that from our limited wisdom and insight we could say, well, yeah, I think this would have worked better, God. But then again, we're robbing God of his attributes. We're saying we know more than he does. So we have to submit ourselves to what do we know about God. He's all-knowing. He's all-powerful. He does all things according to his good and glory, and the good of his church as well. So we have to trust this was the thing to do, even though for Adam and Eve it wasn't the right thing for them to do. Okay, so section 2, then we're going to do 2 sections today. It says, by this sin, they, so Adam and Eve, fell from their original righteousness and communion with God, and so became dead in sin, wholly defiled in all the parts and faculties of the soul and body. So when Adam and Eve sinned, what happened there? And again, we look up the scripture references, please. That's why I include them. They're in that bluish bold color there. But original righteousness, God made all things well, all things good. But our righteousness talks about the holiness in which God created us upright before him, able to live within his presence based on our own righteousness at the time. And communion, that's relationship, to commune with someone. A community is the living together of people. So we were able to commune and live with God on a regular basis. These are the essential components of a covenant relationship: love and law. You have a right standing and a relationship that you walk and talk with people every day. So when it says we died in sin, Adam and Eve, and then that's passed on to us, that'll be in the next section. But dead in sin, our depravity. When we have offended God, well, he's a holy and eternal God. So we have offended his holiness, and we've offended that holiness eternally. Now, as human beings, even from Adam and Eve's standpoint, still relatively within a perfect garden and world there before, thorns, thistles, and all that kind of stuff. What did he have to offer to God? Nothing. Everything was God's. He couldn't offer anything to atone for his sin. He didn't have anything. And our communion with God, the life Adam was to live before God, was to be an eternal one. Now, eternal in the sense of, let's look at it from time. When was he to take a break from his service and love to God? He wasn't. So if there's no breaks, it's 24/7 that we love and worship and walk with our God blamelessly, and he stumbles, there's no makeup time. There's no time to go back and try to say, well, let me make that up to you. And Adam, he has to flee from God. If you understand God's holiness and his justice, then to go towards him is to basically go towards your own death. And that's best case scenario, right? If Adam had wanted to do those things. But again, we see in sin the corruption as well, that we flee from God because we want to seek our own way. We want to still assert that I am right. You have an argument with a child over, why did you do this? And they will seek to justify themselves in what they did. They don't think that they were wrong. It says of Adam and Eve in the garden, and they learned good and evil. In a sense that we don't talk that way. We would say they experienced making good and evil in and of themselves. They decided what was right. They decided what was wrong and what was in their best interest. And that's why they ate. They didn't see a problem with it. They didn't see that they were going to die. They believed the lie of the devil. So that's the gist of section 2. Our righteousness is lost. Our communion is lost. And those go hand in hand, right? If you're in a relationship with somebody and you cheat on them, you say, well, that's the legal part. I shouldn't have done that. Does that hurt the communion part? Well, yeah, because now how are they to trust you and all this stuff? So they go hand in hand. You trust because you walk, because you obey, and you respect this mutual law, this new mutual righteousness between both parties. And when that's tampered with or broken, the communion, the fellowship, the covenant is broken. So that's why we would say within the covenant of works, This covenant relationship based on Adam's righteous works is broken because he ceased to love God and he turned to loving himself. So we have nothing to offer. Our debt is ours. We can't approach and try to offer something to God. We have nothing to give. And we don't even muster that within our own, like it says, in all the parts of our body and soul. We don't have that grain of being that says, I'm going to go make this right. No, in our fallen estate, in our estate of sin and misery, we seek to instead to justify ourselves. Shake our fist at God and say, you can't condemn me for this. I was only doing what I wanted to do. So those are these two sections 1 and 2 of chapter 6. And we'll discuss more, obviously, next time. God bless. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.